So in this segment, we're going to be talking about how Brexit red tape has made it easier for EU nations to import lamb from New Zealand than from Wales. So you'd think it'd be, more difficult to import lamb from. I guess this is about SPS and stuff like that, but New Zealand is very far away compared to Britain, and yet, I reckon you're going to see imports of New Zealand beef go up within the EU to make up for some of the shortfall from the lack of imports of British beef into the EU, which seems ridiculous given how far New Zealand is. But SPS checks are a pain. So, new red tape introduced as a result of Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, which is good framing from The Independent, means it is now easier for EU countries to import lamb from New Zealand than from Wales, producers have warned. And this is because New Zealand has an SPS agreement with the EU and the UK does not. So it says the UK is thought to be seeking a New Zealand-style approach with the EU to recognise each other's standards as equivalent while not demanding any further alignment. New Zealand's arrangement with Brussels means that around 1% of goods are subject to SPS checks upon arrival versus the 30% for the UK. And, you got George Eustace saying we want to work on a veterinary partnership agreement with the EU so we can try to get some easements and to make sure goods can flow more smoothly. Thought things were going to go great, mate. So so what we can gather from this is meat products have a much easier time getting into to the EU from New Zealand than they do from the UK. So Pete Robertson, chief executive of the Food and Drink Federation in Wales, I think that is, said that the iconic Welsh delicacy, which was one of the many hit by additional costs, veterinary inspections and paperwork post-Brexit trading relations, and he warned that changes since the end of the UK's transition out of the EU single market and customs union meant a large part of the agri-food sector was finding its business models no longer viable. And if this continues, we're going to see a lot of British meat and other kind of agri-food industries go down the drain, and because their business models aren't viable, they'll struggle to up the price on their products because they're struggling to compete with EU products. They'll struggle to compete with New Zealand beef because even though transport costs are more expensive, there won't be as many SPS checks, because at the moment, if you want to import meats from the UK, if you want to import meat from the UK into the EU, there is paperwork that people on the other side, the EU side, have to do, and that sounds like it's less stressful if you're going to import stuff from New Zealand. Also, the fact that you've still got to compete with beef, kind of produced by EU countries as well, because they could increase production because of the the lack of UK available beef. There's a market here for EU countries to fill the gap that has been vacated by Britain. So anyways, one meat exporter has seen a £100,000 load of animal carcasses be scrapped because a single one had fallen off the hook inside a lorry, whilst other businesses have seen consignment stopped for having forms filled in with the wrong colour ink. Obviously, this sort of stuff they're going to be a lot more careful about, especially the ink one. However, that's not the main reason why exports have fallen. These are just minor mistakes that people have made. Meanwhile, a ferry company reported freight volumes at Wales principal cargo port Holyhead down by as much as 70% in the first few weeks of January. Obviously, we've seen trade numbers go up, but we need to wait to see the actual impact when it comes to the agri-food industry, because some of the imports that have gone up may be down to chemicals and other non-perishable goods, so we'll have to wait on that one. But I will be doing a video kind of looking at the I think it's the macro numbers rather than the micro numbers of the specifics, because we have to wait a bit longer for the specific numbers. UK exporters give up on sea routes to the Republic of Ireland, and Irish companies send trucks directly by boat to France or Belgium rather than use the land bridge across Britain to the continent. That's something we've spoken about before, and that's a loss of revenue for Britain, because these lorry drivers do stop off in places. There's a big lorry cafe in Northampton town centre called Super Sausage Cafeteria, where there's a massive car park for lorries, and lorry drivers can stop off there and eat and take a break. And obviously, with these lorries and cargo ships bypassing the UK entirely, that's a loss of revenue for these places. So this is here, even if they felt they were well prepared, these are about, the agri-food sector, even if they felt they were well prepared for the transition out of the EU single market and customs union on the 1st of January, they still had, unexpected bureaucratic burden. So I do wonder how prepared these industries were had no one warned them about what customs and vet checks would be like, because the government definitely didn't. They just said get prepared, but they didn't say how you should be prepared, because realistically the government didn't know until the 24th of December what specifically is going to happen, especially will there be tariffs or won't there. Also the unquote as well, and also the fact that if we had some sort of SPS agreement within the trading and cooperation agreement, they wouldn't have had so many aggressive checks. So it was almost impossible for these industries to prepare properly for what was to come. The only thing they could have done is prepare for a worst case scenario. Sorry, I got distracted here. So we've heard one of the particular exporters of meat who sent a whole lot of meat carcasses to France. One had fallen off the hook. Ordinarily, that one carcass would be taken away and the load would have been waved through. On this occasion, the entire load of £100,000 worth of meat was scrapped. And I don't know why specifically that happened, if it's an overzealous kind of customs or SPS agent, or are these the rules for, if anything goes wrong, boom, the whole thing is scrapped. But if it was under, if we were still a part of the EU, that wouldn't have happened. But this business have lost a lot of money from this. Small scale producers sending parcels as part of a larger consignment in a truck or container are finding dramatic increase in paperwork and charges with export health certificates a particular problem. Also the fact that if there's a mistake on any bit of the stuff being exported, even if that's not your fault, your whole shipment will get delayed, which costs a lot of money. And also it impacts your reliability as a business. If you cannot be relied upon to export the stuff that another business or a consumer wants, they ain't gonna come back. So, it says here, before the deal, it required 2 pieces of paperwork, this to export meat, and now it requires 41 pieces of paper, which is ridiculous, but these are the rules. So, for example, you'd send a sample, this talking about the increase in costs. So, for example, you'd send a sample from the UK to Sweden or Finland, and it would cost you £30, and now it costs you £85. For small and medium enterprise sector in Wales, then quite often you're sending goods that only have a value of £25, but they can cost you a massive amount because of paperwork and vet checks. It's ridiculous. The changes have put Welsh lamb at a disadvantage compared to rivals much farther away. Obviously, he's talking about New Zealand here, and that it's easier to import meat from New Zealand into the EU than it is from Wales. Wales geographically much closer to the EU than New Zealand. There'll be 20 times more checks on Welsh lamb going into the EU than there is for New Zealand because of a mutual recognition of the vet procedures. And actually, we use a similar system to the EU, while in New Zealand they use a completely different system. So you can see how important, as we mentioned in previous videos, SPS alignment to the EU is to allow easy exports of meats and agri-food into the EU. How important that SPS agreements are. He warned that difficulties can be expected to increase when grace periods for imports expire in April. That's not going to happen in April, right? That's been delayed, bringing similar additional burdens to those experienced by exporters. Those import checks have been delayed, I think, until January next year. So it's very strange this article doesn't mention that, or this person doesn't mention that. This person goes on to say, but clearly the food supply chains will be under pressure for sure. He said there were a lot of businesses in Wales whose viability of their current business model going forward is under threat, and warned MPs there was no single magic bullet solution that could resolve their difficulties. I mean, an SPS agreement would help, but clearly there's still paperwork and vet checks, as even if you do have some sort of agreement. Plaid Cymru MP Ben Lake, a member of the committee, called for the UK and the EU to restart negotiations, reducing the non-tariff barriers to trade created by Mr Johnson's trade and cooperation agreement. He goes on to say, sadly, this reflects the problems businesses across Wales are facing when trading with the EU. It's not just Wales, it's the UK in general, but obviously he's an MP from Wales. Mr. Lake said it's clear that further negotiations are allowed under the TCA and are required between the UK and EU with a view to achieve mutual equivalence agreement to reduce non-tariff barriers. The issue is, if we do have this kind of agreement of equivalency, Brexiteers are going to be asked, what was the benefit of Brexit if we're still adhering to EU standards? Because simply, if we are doing that, we should have just stayed a part of the EU, which is a no-brainer to anyone at this point. The UK government must pursue these issues with urgency if we are to avoid businesses, including farmers, wholesalers, hauliers, and fishermen, having to make difficult decisions. And the thing is, these, to the wider UK GDP, these are not the biggest industries, the most important ones when it comes to money, but in terms of impacting local economies, you have whole kind of villages and towns that are really reliant on, the fishing industry and, the farming industry. And if anything happens to those, you're talking about huge amounts of unemployment, especially within industries that require a specific skill. You're going to have to retrain these people, which is difficult. And these are proud industries, the industries that keep, people going with food, etc. These are important industries. The only solution I can see is that once import checks begin from, for goods coming in from the EU to the UK, I can imagine that these kind of farmers and fishermen are going to be looking a lot more at the domestic market, because importers are going to have trouble getting products imported into the UK. So it might be the case that these farms and fishermen may have the opportunity to kind of keep products more within the UK. But if that was viable already, they would be doing that. There's clearly an issue with maybe there's too much of supply, therefore they export it, or the fact that maybe businesses and consumers in the EU pay more for British beef and fish for the specific kinds that we export. I'm not 100% sure yet about that, but what we do know is that there are massive problems within the agri-food industry, and if the UK does not get an SPS agreement soon and equivalency soon, we're going to have huge problems within these specific towns and villages, and also cities. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Shouts out New Zealand for their great COVID response and the fact that they have high farming standards. Big up Jacinta Ardent. And remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.